Welcome back. Remember, guys, that at any time you can pause the video, rewind, fast forward as you need to. So, welcome to Passage 2. Read the passage and answer the questions that follow. Excerpt from Ice, The Amazing History of the Ice Business by Lawrence Pringle. Read this excerpt about harvesting and selling ice in the early 1800s. Before refrigeration. In colder parts of North America, some landowners had below-ground ice pits or above-ground ice houses. Groups of farmers or townspeople sometimes worked together to harvest ice and share it. They tried to make ice last as long as possible using different materials as insulation: hay, wood shavings, and sawdust, tiny bits of wood that fall as saw blades cut through wood. Despite such efforts, the last ice had usually melted by August or September. This meant no more ice for at least 3 or 4 months. Still, having any ice last far into summer was a treat denied for most people of those times. Ice for everyone. Some men dreamed of making ice available year-round. One had even more ambitious dreams. Frederick Tudor came from a wealthy Boston family. The family estate, Rockwood, included a pond from which ice was cut and stored, and later used to make ice cream and to chill drinks in summertime. This childhood experience gave Frederick Tudor a business idea when he was nearly 22 years old. In August 1805, Tudor wrote of his plan for transporting ice to tropical climates. Frederick was joined by his older brother William, but he was the driving force of the business. Although he wrote in his journal that people only laugh and believe me not when I tell them I'm going to carry ice to the West Indies, he dedicated his life to achieving his goal. In the process, he inspired others to make discoveries and inventions for cutting, storing, and transporting ice. In the 1800s, he was called the Ice King, and today, Frederick Tudor is called the father of the ice industry. Tudor's dream of selling ice soon led to important changes in ice harvesting. The common practice was to use axes to chop ice from lakes, ponds, and rivers. The irregular pieces were loaded into carts and wagons and taken to be stored. Because of their odd shapes, the ice melted rather quickly. Irregular pieces expose more surface area to air than do pieces with smooth, flat surfaces. The greater the exposure to air, the faster the ice melts. Men also cut the ice with saws. This produced blocks of ice with more even sides. But the work was slow and difficult. Then, in 1827, Nathaniel J. Wythe invented a horse-drawn ice cutter. With this saw, ice could be cut quickly into squares and rectangles. This made the ice easier to transport and store, and the ice blocks melted more slowly than irregular pieces. Frederick Tudor and others also tried to find better ways to store ice. Some melting was inevitable. The challenge was to keep it to a minimum. One surprising discovery: storing ice above ground in an ice house was often better than storing it below ground. Underground, the bottommost ice might sit in meltwater, which caused more thawing. In a well-built ice house, the floor was off the ground, not resting on it. This allowed meltwater to drain away. Since dark colors absorb solar energy, the walls and sometimes even the roofs of the ice houses were painted white to reflect sunlight. Finally, a well-built ice house was windowless, had its entrance door facing north, and had vents in its roof to allow any heat to escape. Whether ice was stored, transported by wagons, ships, or trains, it had to be insulated to prevent melting. Many kinds of insulation were tried, including hay, straw, and charcoal. In 1806, hay was used as insulation for ice loading on a sailing ship from Boston to Martinique in the Caribbean Sea. Much of the ice melted on the long voyage. At first, Frederick Tudor had trouble hiring sailors because they feared that the ice cargo would melt quickly, fill the ship with water, and cause it to sink. Then, because ice was such a novelty in Martinique, Tudor had trouble selling the remaining ice. It was 1820 before his long-distance ice business became profitable. Eventually, people learned that dry sawdust spread between and around the blocks of ice was the best installation. Oh my gosh, guys, sorry, I can't talk. It was the best insulation. Wet sawdust could be dried, then reused. At lumber mills, sawdust had been worthless waste. Thanks to the growing ice business, it became a valuable commodity. Another challenge for pioneers and inventors of the ice business was making an insulated container for storing ice in homes, restaurants, saloons, and hotels. In 1803, a Maryland farmer and engineer named Thomas More described such a device in a pamphlet entitled An Essay on the Most Eligible Construction of Ice Houses. Also, a description of the newly invented machine called the refrigerator. That term, refrigerator, was used long before the invention of the electric-powered appliance we know today. Still, most people called this first kind of refrigerator an icebox. It was made out of wood with an inner lining of iron or porcelain with an insulation material between the wood and the lining. Like an ice house, an ice box needed to get rid of meltwater via a tube leading to a pan beneath. Through the years, icebox designs improved and they became better insulated. Thomas More had tried insulation of rabbit fur. Fortunately for rabbits, their fur was a poor ice insulator. Ice boxes became common in homes, restaurants, and hotels. Thanks to the persistence of Frederick Tudor, Nathaniel Waite, and many others, the ice business grew and grew. In major U.S. cities, ice was no longer a luxury for the wealth. It was affordable for nearly everyone. All right, go ahead and pause the video to do your thinking job. Number 8. Which statement describes the relationship among Frederick Tudor, Nathaniel Waite, and Thomas More? M. They worked as a team to develop the technology needed to store ice. B. They were in competition to build the most profitable ice company. R. Each contributed his own ideas that helped make ice preservation possible. S. Each invented tools that are still used today for ice production and storage. 9. What is the meaning of the word commodity as it is used in paragraph 7? A. An item created from rare materials. B. A process intended to save time or money. C. A product that is bought or sold. D. An improvement to an existing design. Number 10. How did Tudor's actions influence the events in the section entitled Ice for Everyone? M. Before Tudor came along, people had many wrong ideas about the best way to handle ice. P. Tudor's ideas for an ice business led to the necessary technological developments. R. Tudor worked even harder after realizing people were laughing at his idea to sell ice in the tropics. S. Many people contributed important ideas and inventions to its progress, but only Tudor got credit for building the ice industry. Number 11. The following item has two parts. Answer part A, then answer part B. Part A. Which best describes the author's perspective on Tudor? A. Tudor's family relationships were cause for concern. B. Tudor's business success deserves respect. C. Tudor's place in history has been exaggerated. D. Tudor's ideas about ice were always right. Part B. Select a sentence from the passage that provides evidence for the author's perspective in Part A. M. Frederick Tudor came from a wealthy Boston family. Paragraph 4. P. Frederick was joined by his older brother William, but he was the driving force of the business. Paragraph 4. R. In the process, he inspired others to make discoveries and inventions for cutting, storing, and transporting ice. Paragraph 4. S. Then, because ice was such a novelty in Martinique, Tudor had trouble selling the remaining ice. Paragraph 7. 12. Which best shows the central ideas of the passage? A. Ice was impossible to store during the summer months. Frederick Tudor worked with his brother William to create an invention to keep ice. B. Many people contributed ideas that made it possible to preserve ice. The invention of the icebox allowed many people to have access to ice year-round. C. Before the icebox was invented, people had many ideas about harvesting and sharing ice. It was important to keep ice cold in order to get it to tropical places. D. Maryland farmer Thomas More wrote a pamphlet explaining how to keep ice cold. Ice boxes were used to transport ice to the Caribbean Sea. 13. What is the primary way that the author has structured the article? What is the primary way that the author has structured the article? M. By listing in order each event that occurred in Tudor's quest to transport ice to tropical climates. P. By explaining how new technologies helped solve Tudor's problems in transporting ice to the tropical climates. R. By describing the challenges Tudor and others faced in harvesting, storing, and transporting ice and the ways that they rose to those challenges. S. By comparing Tudor's business success in transporting ice with Wyeth's success in changing the way that ice was cut and stored. 14. The following item has two parts. Answer part A and then answer part B. Part A. What does the word insulated mean as it is used in paragraph 7? A. Arranged in blocks. B. Cleaned before use. C. Mixed with water. D. Protected from warmth. Part B. Select the phrase that best helps the reader determine the correct answer to Part A. M. Ice was stored. P. Transported by wagons, ships, or trains. R. To prevent melting. S. Hay, straw, and charcoal. All right, guys, remember that you can rewind and replay any part of the video if you need to. You can also go back to the first video and re-listen to that story or any questions if you need to, but go ahead at this time. If you are finished, you can bubble in your answers, and then you can take your paper and put it in the bin in the back of the room. You guys did a wonderful job. I'm really proud of you. Excellent job.